It was late October, the kind of night where the chill in the air cuts through your jacket and crawls across your skin. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital, utterly drained and ready to crash the second I got home. The clock on my dashboard read 2:27 a.m. I remember it because I stared at it for a few long seconds, thinking about how I was going to have to be back on the floor again in less than 12 hours. Being a respiratory therapist meant unpredictable hours and even more unpredictable patients. But this particular night had dragged on worse than most. I pulled out of the hospital parking lot in State College, Pennsylvania, sipping the last of my cold coffee. The streets were practically empty. No cars, no people, just the eerie quiet that only happens in small towns deep into the night. As I merged onto Route 322, a stretch of highway that runs through heavily wooded areas and long, empty roads, I felt a strange calm wash over me. There was something soothing about being on the road at that hour. Just me, my car, and the hum of tires against asphalt. No traffic, no distractions, no noise, except for the occasional rustle of wind slicing through trees on either side of the highway. The fog had started to roll in about 10 minutes into the drive. Not unusual for that area, especially with the nearby creeks and drop in temperature. But this fog felt different, thicker, denser. The high beams only made it worse, bouncing light off the mist and turning everything into a blinding white cloud. I turned them off and slowed to about 40 miles per hour, hands gripping the wheel a little tighter. The radio, which had been playing some late-night indie rock station, started cutting in and out. Static crackled through the speakers, and for some reason, I didn't bother fixing it. It just added to the atmosphere, like I was driving through some forgotten pocket of the world where time had stopped. Even with the windows rolled up, the silence felt alive. There was no sound of insects, no cars passing by, nothing. Just the mechanical rhythm of the engine and the occasional pop of gravel under the tires. I was surrounded by endless black trees, all of them reaching up into nothing, their branches half visible through the veil of fog. Occasionally, the moon would break through for a second or two, casting long shadows across the road before vanishing again. I kept glancing at my side mirrors. It was a habit, something drilled into me after years of driving late and alone. I don't know what I was expecting to see, maybe deer, maybe nothing, but every now and then I got this tight feeling in my chest. Like something was out there, just beyond what my headlights could reach. The kind of sensation you get when someone stands behind you in a room, quiet and unmoving, but you still feel them watching. I shrugged it off. Told myself I was just tired, too many shifts back to back, too little sleep, and probably too much caffeine. The road was straight for miles, broken only by the occasional sign warning of curves or falling rocks. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that the further I drove, the more detached everything became. Like I had left something behind at the hospital. Not an object, but a tether. A grounding. Out here, I felt completely unmoored, like I was driving through a dream that was slowly becoming a nightmare. About 30 minutes into the drive, as I moved deeper into the fog-covered stretch of Route 322, I began to notice how still everything was. The headlights from my car illuminated only a few feet ahead before the mist swallowed them whole, and the thick silence made every small sound. The click of the turn signal, the low hum of the engine, feel unnaturally loud. I had passed maybe 2 other cars the entire drive, both heading in the opposite direction, their lights vanishing into the darkness behind me as quickly as they had appeared. It was the kind of night where the road felt suspended in time, like it led nowhere and would go on forever. Then I saw her. Out of the fog, maybe 30 feet ahead, a figure started to take shape along the shoulder of the road. My first reaction was confusion. Was that a person? I leaned forward instinctively, squinting through the windshield, trying to get a better look. My foot eased off the gas. It was definitely a person, a woman. She was just standing there on the edge of the road, barely outside the reach of my headlights. What caught my eye first was the way she was dressed. A white dress, thin, almost translucent in the fog and moonlight, fluttering slightly like it was being moved by a wind I couldn't feel. Her hair was long, dark and unkempt, partially covering her face. I couldn't make out any details, but she looked pale, her posture strangely stiff. She was barefoot. That's what made my stomach twist. Not that she was out there alone at this hour, but that she was standing on cold, cracked pavement with bare feet in the middle of a freezing October night. My instincts kicked in. I thought maybe she was hurt or lost or had escaped from something. I checked my mirrors, slowed down, and considered pulling over to see if she needed help. But she didn't move. She didn't wave. She didn't take a step toward the car. She just stood there, motionless, as if she had been waiting for me or for someone, and I was merely next in line. I remember the way the fog swirled around her, how the mist clung to the ground at her feet and made her look like she wasn't entirely real, like she was part of the night itself. As I got closer, maybe 15 feet away, I could see her face a little better, or I thought I could. But the moment I blinked, she was gone. 1 second she was there. The next second, the space was completely empty. No sound, no movement, just the open road and the lingering mist in my headlights. I slammed the brakes harder than I needed to, heart hammering against my ribs, hands locked on the steering wheel. I looked everywhere. Rear view mirror, side mirrors, even craned my head around. But there was nothing. She had vanished without a trace. No place to run to, no noise of footsteps. Nothing disturbed the silence. I sat there for a good 30 seconds, my breath coming fast, trying to process what I had just seen. Logic tried to kick in. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was sleep deprived, hallucinating, or my eyes had played a trick on me. But the way my body reacted told a different story. My skin was cold. My limbs were tight with adrenaline. Something in my gut told me I had seen something real, even if I couldn't explain it. The whole road ahead now felt different, heavier, like whatever that was had left something behind in the air itself. After convincing myself to keep driving, I shook off the unease and focused on the road again, trying to rationalize everything I had just seen. I told myself it must have been a trick of the fog, maybe a tree in just the right shape or a piece of trash caught in the mist. My eyes could have been playing games with me. That's what I wanted to believe. I rolled down the window a little, letting the cold air hit my face, trying to stay grounded, alert, and fully awake. The silence continued to press in on me from all sides, broken only by the soft rumble of the tires and the low whistle of wind through the cracked window. My hands were still tense on the steering wheel, and I could feel sweat in my palms despite the chill. The road stretched ahead, winding gently through the trees, every curve hidden by the thick, low fog that now seemed to cling more aggressively to the pavement. I kept my eyes locked on the yellow lines, using them like a lifeline to stay focused. But just as I started to regain a fragile sense of calm, I noticed something up ahead again. My stomach dropped immediately. There she was, the same woman, the same white dress, the same long hair hanging lifelessly around her face. She was standing on the side of the road again, this time on the opposite side, exactly the same pose. Facing the road, feet bare, her head slightly tilted like she was listening for something. There was no way I could be seeing her again. It didn't make sense. There hadn't been any turn-offs, no side roads, no intersections where someone could have doubled back. I hadn't stopped long enough for anyone to pass me or get ahead of me. It was impossible. Completely, undeniably impossible. Yet there she was. I gripped the steering wheel harder, trying to convince myself to look straight ahead, to not slow down this time, to not give in to the overwhelming temptation to try to understand what was happening. But my eyes were already locked on her. As the car rolled past her again, I noticed this time that she didn't just stand still. She turned slightly. Barely. Her head moved just enough to suggest she was looking at me, or maybe through me. My breath caught in my throat. The air inside the car felt suddenly thick, hard to swallow. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. My mind was racing, running through every possible explanation, but nothing fit. I kept checking the mirrors, rear view, side, even twisting around to glance out the back window, but she wasn't there. No sign of her. Again. I drove on, feeling every muscle in my body tighten, alert to every shadow, every flicker of movement in the periphery. The road was beginning to feel like a loop, like I was stuck in some kind of strange circuit where time didn't behave the way it should. That second sighting pushed something deeper into my chest, a kind of primal fear, the kind that doesn't come from jump scares or bad dreams, but from the sudden realization that reality might not be as stable as we want to believe. Seeing her again shattered any hope that I could chalk it up to exhaustion or imagination. It didn't feel like coincidence. It didn't feel random. It felt like I was being watched, like I was being waited for. I was afraid to blink, afraid to take my eyes off the road, not because I thought I'd crash, but because I thought the moment I looked away, something would change again, something I wouldn't be able to explain or forget. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, my heart thudding so loudly in my ears that it drowned out everything else. My breathing had gone shallow, quick, and I could feel adrenaline pulsing in my veins. I wasn't just uneasy anymore. I was afraid, genuinely afraid. The logical part of my brain was trying to grasp at straws, trying to tell me it was a coincidence, a trick of the fog, a hallucination from exhaustion. But the way my hands shook on the steering wheel told a different story. I knew what I had seen. I had seen the same woman twice in places she couldn't possibly have been, doing the exact same thing, in the exact same posture, as if frozen in time and space, just waiting for me to drive by. My foot stayed heavy on the pedal. I wasn't just trying to get home anymore. I was trying to outrun something I didn't understand. The road began to blur at the edges of my vision as the speed increased. The fog swirled past like smoke, but I didn't care. I would have driven off the road if that's what it took to get away from her. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror even though I didn't want to see her again. Every few seconds, I looked, half expecting her to be sitting in the back seat, half visible in the dark, her reflection just barely there behind me. But each time, the mirror only showed the empty road, swallowed in fog. My mind began to spiral. I started remembering all those late-night horror videos I had watched, the kind that pop up in your feed when you're too tired to sleep but too restless to rest. I used to laugh at the people who told those stories, how they saw a ghost or a creature or some glitch in reality. But now I was in one. Every second I stayed on that road, I felt like I was losing grip on something real. The world around me was starting to feel thinner, like a curtain pulled too tight that could tear open at any moment and show me something I was never supposed to see. I passed mile marker after mile marker, my eyes darting back and forth across the fogged-up windshield, trying to catch anything unusual, but also praying I wouldn't. I didn't want to see her again. I didn't want another impossible glimpse. I just wanted to put miles between us. But even then, a part of me couldn't help but feel that no matter how fast I drove, I wasn't actually moving away from her. It felt like she was tethered to me now, like I had noticed her when I wasn't supposed to, and now I was caught in something I didn't ask for. My jaw was clenched tight, and my teeth were beginning to ache from the pressure. My fingers cramped on the steering wheel, and I had to force myself to loosen them every few minutes just so I wouldn't lock up entirely. I was drenched in cold sweat, every muscle rigid, and I kept muttering to myself, just fragments of thoughts, little prayers, anything to drown out the silence that seemed to be growing louder around me. The fog wasn't letting up, and the trees lining the road seemed to close in tighter, the branches arching overhead like they were watching, listening, waiting for something to happen. I didn't dare stop. I didn't dare look behind me longer than a second. I kept thinking that if I slowed down for even a moment, if I let my guard drop, she'd appear again, closer this time, maybe not on the side of the road, but in the middle of it, forcing me to choose between swerving off into the trees or hitting something that might not even be human anymore. I finally made it home just after 3:15 a.m., practically running inside and locking every door behind me without even taking my shoes off. The moment I stepped into my apartment, the warmth and light felt surreal, like I had emerged from another world into something that only resembled normalcy. I sat down on the edge of my couch, shaking, my heart still pounding in my chest. My mind kept flashing back to her, the way she stood there, completely still, both times. The way she had reappeared as if time or distance didn't apply to her, the expression or lack of it on her face. My rational side was trying to take over, trying to convince me to sleep it off and forget it happened. But I couldn't sleep, not after that. Instead, I found myself at my computer, searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Ghost sightings on Route 322. Strange figures seen on foggy nights. Woman in white Pennsylvania road. I didn't expect to find anything. These stories don't usually come with confirmation. But after about an hour of clicking through forgotten blogs, old forum threads, and abandoned websites, I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a post from 2009 on an old paranormal message board. Someone had shared their own experience from years earlier, 1996 they said, driving on Route 322 between State College and Potter's Mills. The description was almost identical. A woman in a white dress, barefoot, standing on the side of the road late at night. The user described feeling a strange stillness, the fog growing unnaturally thick, and the woman reappearing farther down the road without any explanation. They had also driven faster, terrified, trying to put distance between them and her, only to feel like she was always just around the corner, waiting. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The details were too close to what I had seen. I kept digging, looking for anything more. It took another hour, but eventually I found a local news archive buried in a small town online newspaper database. The article was from October 1993. A young woman named Margaret Ellen Probst had been reported missing. She had last been seen leaving a Halloween party in a small town near the area where I had seen the figure. She was wearing a white dress. Her car had been found on the side of Route 322, completely intact, keys still in the ignition, door ajar. No signs of struggle, no blood, no witnesses, just gone. The part that haunted me the most was a single sentence near the end of the article. A few drivers passing through the area later reported seeing a barefoot woman in a white dress walking along the road, but none of those sightings were ever confirmed. That was it. One line, buried in a case that had never been solved, a case no one seemed to remember. But I had seen her, or something that looked like her, and I wasn't the only one. I kept staring at her name, Margaret Ellen Probst. I read it over and over, like maybe the more I looked at it, the more answers I'd get. But all it did was raise more questions. Who was she? Why was she still there? Why had I seen her? Why had she looked right at me the second time as if she knew who I was? It didn't feel like a random haunting. It didn't feel like I had just stumbled into a ghost story. It felt personal, like I had stepped into a loop or into a place that remembered her so deeply it kept calling her back. The next few days after that night passed in a kind of mental fog, one that matched the eerie mist that had surrounded me on Route 322. I went to work. I talked to people. I answered emails. But nothing felt real. Everything I did was going through the motions while my mind stayed locked on her. I couldn't stop replaying the drive, the exact spots I had seen her, the expressionless face, the pale skin, the impossible reappearance. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing on the side of the road. I saw the way her head turned ever so slightly, like she wasn't just looking at me, she was recognizing me. I stopped telling myself it was a dream or a hallucination. I knew what I saw. I knew how it made me feel. I couldn't shake the sensation that I had been part of something bigger, something that didn't care whether or not I believed in it. And worse, I began to wonder if it was really over. Part of me thought that once I got home, I would be safe. That whatever I had experienced on that road belonged to that stretch of highway and nowhere else. But I was wrong. The first sign came 3 nights later. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth in the dim light of my bathroom, when I heard something. A knock, very soft. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. It wasn't the front door. It was the window. My bathroom is on the second floor. There's no balcony, no tree close enough to knock against it. Just one clear pane of glass looking out over the alley behind my building. I crept toward it, barely able to breathe, and looked through the blinds. Nothing. Just the quiet darkness of the alley and the distant hum of a street light flickering. I tried to write it off as my nerves. Maybe something fell. Maybe an animal had knocked something over. But the next night, it happened again. This time, it was the hallway outside my apartment. A soft knock, 3 quick taps. I opened the door slowly, expecting to find a neighbor or maybe a delivery left late by mistake. But the hall was empty, dead silent. No footsteps, no closing doors. Just stillness, the kind that pressed in on you from every side, the kind I remembered from the road. I started checking the locks 3 times a night. I left the lights on. I stopped sleeping. And when I did manage to drift off, I dreamed of her. Not always on the road. Sometimes she was in my apartment, standing in the corner of my bedroom, sitting at the foot of my bed, always barefoot, always wearing the same white dress, and always staring at me, as if waiting for something. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air. The image of her face burned into my mind. I started keeping a journal, writing everything down, not because I thought it would help, but because I needed to put the thoughts somewhere before they consumed me. Every detail of that night, every knock, every dream, every time I felt her presence just out of sight. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Who would believe me? I didn't want to be labeled as unstable or paranoid, but deep down, I knew this wasn't about belief. It was about something I had seen and couldn't unsee. Something I had crossed paths with, and now it wouldn't let go. Sometimes I'd drive by that stretch of Route 322 again, not on purpose, just when I had no other choice. And every time, I'd feel the weight return. The fog would seem thicker, the air heavier, and the headlights would barely penetrate the dark. I never saw her again in the same way, not fully, but every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of white in the trees, or a shadow at the edge of the road that disappeared when I looked too closely, like she was still there, watching from a distance, not quite finished with me yet.